Just imagine a third chair with South Africa sitting in it, and we're going to be speaking directly to her as a leader. And we're going to literally be walking alongside her as she navigates the very high seas of the nation, the nation's work. And so if she was here, and she is here with us, what would you say to this person if you had that opportunity to sit down in conversation with her? What would you say to her here, right now?
Michelle, in a weird way, and I don't know where this is coming from, but I want to start with, I'm sorry. I'm sorry that South Africa isn't what we all thought she would be all these years post the advent of democracy. And then I want to say, so where do we go from here?
So, Jo, when I say the words South Africa, what comes to mind, if I may ask?
Sure, Michelle, it's a good question. And I think South Africa has been such a big part of my identity over the years. I mean, I think it's 26 years ago that I was Miss South Africa. So every time I hear those two words together, it sort of feels like it's part of me. And South Africa is something that just evokes so much emotion from me, from fellow South Africans. I was actually laughing. I mean, both of us, our children are both South African and another nationality. And it's interesting when I ask them what they are, they usually say South African first. So it's something that just brings such pride. South Africa is a beautiful place. It's a confused place, and it's a confusing place. So for me, there's so much, I would say, depth and emotion. There's so much courage I could ascribe to it. There's so much pain. There's so much joy. And I think, because I did think about this a bit, and I think there's also confusion. It's only a few decades since the advent of democracy here. So I think we love to sort of chant about the rainbow nation and unity and diversity, but there's so much pain that lies beneath the surface. And I think that's why conversations like these are important, because once one just sweeps things under the carpet, and it's sort of like if you have, it's a terrible analogy, but if you have some wound and you don't wait for it or give it time to properly heal, and you're just covering it up with makeup and making, oh, it's so beautiful, the healing needs to happen. And I think we're still in the process of healing, and that takes a while. So yeah, South Africa, it's emotion, it's pride, it's confusion, it's love, it's pain, it's joy, it's a lot.
On that note, this is SparkXNation, and I'm your host, Michelle Eglin. Today, we're dancing with Jo-Ann Strauss, one of the 64 million puzzle pieces shaping who South Africa might yet become. I'm so excited to be in conversation with you, Jo, and thank you for that very layered and very nuanced start to kick off this very interesting and layered conversation. So welcome, Jo.
Thank you so much. And I'm so excited that you're doing this. Well done on making sure that conversations are heard.
Thank you, Jo, for your presence. So we're going to kick off with a very playful question. We framed how you hold South Africa in the mind, but we're going to bring her right here into the room with us. So just imagine a third chair with South Africa sitting in it, and we're going to be speaking directly to her as a leader. And we're going to literally be walking alongside her as she navigates the very high seas of the nation, the nation's work, of geopolitics, of the current political climate, of the economic climate that we are all navigating. It's a complex time for South Africa. So we are going to bring her into this conversation boldly and bravely, and we're going to speak directly to her. And so I'd like to kick off with, if she was here, and she is here with us, what would you say to this person if you had that opportunity to sit down in conversation with her? What would you say to her here, right now?
Michelle, in a weird way, and I don't know where this is coming from, but I want to start with, I'm sorry. I'm sorry that South Africa isn't what we all thought she would be all these years post the advent of democracy. And then I want to say, so where do we go from here? And I think, Michelle, for me, it's an interesting one because I was born in South Africa in Blackheath. My parents come from Elsies River, Ravensmead. I grew up in Blackheath. I sort of came at the rocky time, just past 76. And, it was an interesting time in South Africa. My dad was arrested during the riots, the political riots, and he was at UWC. And I remember the high hopes that he had for South Africa. And I've seen both sides of what I would call South Africa. So South Africa, I've watched how we imagined this brighter future for everyone. And then I see where we are now. And yes, the future is to a certain extent brighter, but the light is still very dim for so many. And I'm really sorry that we're still in that situation, because to me, we have everything that we need in this country. We literally are one of the most blessed nation in terms of natural beauty, mineral. There are so many incredible, intellectual, creative minds in this country. So I think we need to do better. And that to me is the interesting one about South Africa. Is I always say to people, I never say that I grew up underprivileged. I grew up with different privileges. I grew up with a mom and a father and a brother who loved us dearly, this tight-knit family. Sadly, my mom has dementia, and sadly, my brother has passed away. So my dad and I are navigating this South Africa, which he fought for and which I get to inhabit. And I live a very different life now because of privilege, I was able to do something as interesting and nuanced as Miss South Africa, but it gave me a huge opportunity. And my parents always taught us, opportunity dances with those already on the dance floor. So I was afforded various opportunities and I danced with them. I put on my craziest dancing shoes and I danced. I am always hungry. That's the thing, is I'm a hustler, baby. It's so funny. My kids were speaking in class and they had to say what their parents do. And they said, the dad's a doctor and the mom's a hustler. So I hustle. But I think for me, it's also, we live in this country, South Africa, which has got such different stories for so many different people. And we have so much in common, but we also have so much not in common. For example, it's a beautiful day in Cape Town. It's raining. The gardens are being watered. However, so many of our citizens are also literally unable to come to work because of the lack of infrastructure and because we're still fixing so many remnants of the past.
Yeah.
And I do think that we need to apologize to South Africa because all of us need to be less apathetic and to be more hands-on about creating opportunities for more people in South Africa. So we all need to do more.
It's a loaded response. And I mean, reckoning with someone in the room and saying, I'm sorry. It takes a great amount of compassion and empathy and self-awareness to hold that space and acknowledge that you are sorry, that we are sorry as a people. I want to stay there because of how courageous a person has to be to actually acknowledge that. And I think as South Africans, we need to reckon with ourselves individually and perhaps wonder to ourselves and reflect around this very dimension. Is it time for us to fold, to surrender, and to accept that, well, we are complicit in shaping this narrative and, in essence, taking ownership and accountability for the part that we're playing, alongside acknowledging with that, very bravely as you have, and boldly and courageously, that we are in fact sorry. I want to stay there. Yeah. It's just it hit me hard as you said it, alongside everything else, but that particular piece
I don't even know
really
where it came
just moved me. So I want to stay there and go deeper, if we shall.
Michelle, it's an interesting one because I think it's a lot easier to point fingers and to blame. So whether we talk about politicians or we talk about people in leadership, but aren't we all in positions of leadership? Within our households, within our friendships, aren't we all actually able to affect change? And I think that to me is something where I sort of grapple because I've got the privilege also again of knowing both sides of the story. I grew up very differently, traveled by train to school because of the remnants of apartheid. I was still not able to go to a school closer to our house, even though the one school I wanted to go to was 5 minutes from our home. I spent hours commuting on unsafe public transport. But now I live a completely different life. And yes, it's as a result of my hard work, but it's also as a result of a lot of luck. But I also do believe the harder I work, the luckier I get. So I'm all for seeing how much I can do to create a little bit of luck for a lot more people. And to me, I also realize when I look now at perhaps I've been complacent. And I mean, I always think one can do more. And I think by saying sorry, it's a first step in going, and now what? What can I do to improve South Africa? What can I do to say, South Africa, I love you, I'm sorry. How do we make each other better together?
I'm going to go even deeper because I'm so struck by this notion. It is so rare for people to stop and say, I'm sorry. I'm not sure, in your experiences, how often do you really hear people acknowledge and take ownership and own that very bold statement and say, I'm sorry. I'm tussling with this because I'm imagining 64 million psychological puzzle pieces that form this great nation. I'm imagining each of us taking a moment to pause and say, I'm sorry, South Africa. I've failed you. I have failed you, or I need to reimagine the role that I take up in shaping the story of yours. I'm imagining a society do that at large. And that's why this insight that you've brought to this conversation, that's within you as our guest today, has sparked us to think about that particular sort of very complex sort of statement. It's really sort of taken the wind out of my sails because I've heard it been said just not often enough. And so it's caught me somewhat off guard. But I think if we were to imagine a society that could do that, what capacities do you think? Do you think we as South Africa, because we embody her, how do we need to develop to be able to step into that way of being as a society and relate with South Africa in this very compassionate and tolerant and humane way? How do we have to develop as South Africans to nurture this journey forward with South Africa? How do you see that from your vantage point?
Michelle, I think accountability is lacking in this country and globally. I think people need to take responsibility for actions, and people need to acknowledge when they make mistakes. And I think generally, this sort of, if I had to check the pulse of society, I don't think that that's really a big part of who and what we are. And again, this is an absolute generalization, but I think when I just look generally, accountability is lacking. When there is a mistake made in government and leadership, one needs to acknowledge when there's corruption. Yes, there are all these investigations, but how often do we hear from our leaders, I made a mistake, own up to it, and then from there we can build and we can take things forward. So for me, it's, I think with great opportunity and privilege, and there comes responsibility. And I've been so fortunate to work with people in the art world. I had the opportunity to work with Professor Zanele Moholi, a phenomenal, I would call her an art activist, but to work in communities that reminded me so much of where I come from, and then to recognize the young children there as myself from 35 years ago, and to realize again that I am here as a result of opportunities given to me by others, and have I created enough opportunities for others to follow. I think always as we go forward, we need to make sure that we're leaving the door open for others to follow.
Sure.
And as much as I've been the recipient of generosity of people, I've also noticed when some people do close the door behind them because they want to be the only one who has ever achieved that, or the first and the last, because sometimes our ego comes into the fore, or comes to the fore as well. So for me, it is one of those realizations that I am able to do more, and that so many people are able to do more, and so many people with so little do so much to forward this nation, our great love, South Africa.
Yeah.
And that to me is important again, is all of the 64 million voices, all of the 64 million souls, people, all have the ability to affect change. And once we stand back and apathy becomes our big contender in how we view things, when it's always somebody else's fault and not your own, that's when you realize you've already lost the battle.
I think you're speaking a lot to self-awareness here. And if we think of South Africa, and she is here with us in the room, we're speaking to her, she is us. And so when we confront her, we really are confronting a nation. And we're confronting, most importantly, ourselves, because we are all complicit. And as you mentioned, we are all rippling out and spilling over like instruments, and music flowing from every instrument and affecting the collective sound. So we each have work to do in the realm of reflection and becoming more self-aware as leaders in our own right, as change makers and as change catalysts in our own right. I want to speak, more to this notion of self-awareness. How self-aware do you think, and we're going to speak directly to South Africa, how self-aware do you think South Africa is, if we were to just stay there?
I think South Africa as a nation, and this is hard because, again, we're quite South Africa.
There she is. It's a complex one.
It's a complex one.
We're speaking to her here, and it's going to take some reflection for us to dance with that idea. She is with us, and this is our opportunity to start thinking together, because wisdom is collective, right? And we're all holding a puzzle piece of that insight. And so, let's dance with it. There's no one answer.
So how self-aware is South Africa?
How self-aware is this leader right here in the room with us?
I think there's a level of self-awareness, but there's also a level of complacency, and there's also a level of, and how do I say this to you, South Africa, without offending you?
Well, that's the thing. The truth does set us free on the show. It really does.
Yeah.
From your vantage point, it's what feels true for you. And what feels true for someone else will be different. And that's the beauty of this collective wisdom in this country, right? What feels true for you in relation to South Africa is yours. And this is where we bring that vantage point to the fore. Yeah.
I think for me, there's a beautiful Xhosa saying, ukuhamba kukubona, to travel is to see. And the more one's given the opportunity to travel, and that's one of the big things for me, is I've had a chance to see quite a lot. And I've had a chance to live elsewhere, short periods, albeit, but you realize again what a gem we're living in right now. Again, not for everyone, but there is a level of self-awareness, joy, despite all the obstacles. I'm always amazed at how resilient South Africa is and how resourceful South Africa is. So that to me is something, when I travel, and even I listen to my husband who works in many of the state hospitals and with students and educating the future doctors, we do a lot with a little. And that is what South Africa is. It's a place where often there's a joy that rings throughout, and we work with joy. But there is also complacency. Right. And to me, when I travel, I also see, for example, South Africa as the rainbow child, the rainbow nation. Everyone was so excited about the opportunities in the early 90s. The continent is growing at an incredible rate, and there's so much development happening all over the world. And I'm worried that we become too complacent, because as much as we have an incredible place, we need to protect and grow it. And that to me is important, is that I love South Africa so much that I do not want to see her fail. And so I need to know, how can I be of assistance to her?
No, sure. So there's a dimension that's conscious and above the surface for this dear South Africa. She's conscious about dimensions of herself. She's resilient. She's hopeful. She's full of hope. I'm going to say South Africa is full of hope because of how we engage with this complex system. We're survivors, you know. Whether we're thriving is a very different conversation. But are we resilient? Absolutely. And we're conscious about those strengths or those characteristics or those aspects of us as a society. If we were to think about the buried dimensions or the unconscious dimensions where we need to cultivate more awareness around, what might you say to South Africa in those sort of dimensions of her experience?
I think we cannot remain in our comfort zones. And I think we cannot think that our story is the only story. So I think it was Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie. She spoke about the danger of a single story. Ooh. And I think so many of us as South Africans and South Africa become fixed in, transfixed by, immersed in their own story and are unable to see the story right alongside. Silly example, but often when my friends and I complain, I'm unable to go here because there was a problem and there's a problem with accommodation, transport, and why is this person late? Be aware that not everyone lives the life that you do. And there is still such a huge disparity between rich and poor in this country. The Gini coefficient has just gone up and up and up. We are still literally the most unequal society in the world. And when we only think of our own stories and we live oblivious, ignorant to the fact that we live in a very complex society, we run the danger of becoming
blindsided, perhaps.
Blindsided, absolutely.
I mean, now if we were to think of South Africa, this leader, and what you've brought to her awareness, you've sparked her to look within and think about what dimensions of me are conscious, are accessible, right? What do I know about myself and hold true? But what about the parts of me that are actually sabotaging my progress, that I'm not yet able to see, connect with, unravel, deconstruct? And you're speaking to the collective experience in many ways here, because if we do think of South Africa through one lens, or we see her through one experience, we really are shutting out the other 64 million plus stories that are lived out differently. You know, while some are living in technicolor, others might be living in black and white realities, and not as rich and as colorful and as bright. And I think the work ahead is holding that space, as you said, for the dualities and the complexities of the whole picture. Can we hold the whole? Can we hold the whole that is this country? Can we confront the whole that is this country? Can we look reality square and say, this is our South Africa and it's made up of these nuanced stories, but what might we learn through holding space for those nuanced stories and lived realities? Because buried in those stories is insight that's going to help us carve out a different path for this country that we so dearly love. And so there's a conscious dimension, as you've mentioned, and there's an unconscious dimension. And if anything, that sort of buried, dark part of all of us is hijacking the very change that we want to see in South Africa. So very rich.
There's
very
so
rich
much
indeed.
wisdom in this country. There is so much innate wisdom in this country.
Indeed.
And that, to me, is one of the absolute treasures which we do not fully unlock. To have conversations with our elders, to have input from those who have seen South Africa in different eras. And that wisdom, I think, is necessary. I think conversations are necessary. And to me, it's also, again, define South Africa. We speak about South Africa belongs to all who live in it. Do we believe that? And when we say who live in her, are we talking about those who come here for 6 months, live the good life, and then leave? If you call yourself South African, if you consider yourself part of this country, you consider yourself part of the whole country, not just the parts that suit you. That's marriage. That's a relationship. So you cannot just love South Africa and the wine farms and the beauty of it and be ignorant to the fact that that is not all of it. So love fully. I love South Africa fully, and I'm committed to seeing her become the best that she can fully be.
I think on that note, you've given us so much to think about, Jo-Ann, so much to chew on, so much to reflect on as a nation. And this is what the show is about. It's not about judgment. It's not about finger pointing. It's about holding space for the whole. It's about holding the stories that shape this country every day in full view. You've held up a mirror, and at times it's difficult to look at that mirror. But we're going to have to bring a lot of compassion, as you have to the show today, to ourselves. We're going to have to gift ourselves compassion as we reckon with how we are sorry as South Africans for how we've taken up our role in shaping the story up to now. But as we know, Jo-Ann, it's all about the story, and South Africa's story has not yet it's not yet come to an end. We are shaping actively and proactively who this dear country becomes every day. It has been an absolute delight hearing your love, your voice, your heart, and your vantage point on this great nation. I want to thank you on behalf of SparkXNation for joining us, and I can't wait to walk alongside you and shape this nation together alongside the 64 million stories that makes up this great nation. Thank you for joining us, Jo-Ann.
Thank you very much for having me.
Thank you.